Have you ever wondered if the American Revolution was more than just a fight against a king? What if it was actually a carefully designed project, built on some pretty ancient philosophy? Well, today we're diving into a viewpoint that argues exactly that the United States was founded on a specific blueprint for liberty, one that has as much to do with our character as it does with our laws.
Yeah, this quote really hits the nail on the head. The idea here is that the American founding wasn't some spontaneous, chaotic uprising. No, it was a deliberate, almost architectural act. It was an attempt to build a country based on a very clear set of ideas about liberty, order, and what it means to be human.
So, let's get into the why behind it all. According to this perspective, the goal was never to create a pure democracy, where the loudest voices or a temporary majority could change everything on a whim. The real goal was to build a republic of principle, and trust me, that distinction is absolutely key.
At the very bottom of this republic of principle is this concept of a moral law. Basically, it's the idea that certain truths, like your unalienable rights, don't come from any government. They exist on their own, coming from a higher authority. Now think about that. That was a direct shot at the whole divine right of kings idea. It meant no king, no government, no power on earth could ever truly take those rights away.
According to this viewpoint, the founders saw two very different paths for liberty. On one side, you have liberty with virtue. That leads to self-governance, responsibility, and order. But on the other side, you have liberty without virtue. And that, they believed, always spirals into chaos, which then leads to tyranny. For them, true freedom wasn't a free-for-all. It demanded discipline.
Okay, so if virtue is so essential, how are people supposed to develop it? That brings us to the how, the practical part. And this is where we see a connection to the philosophy of Freemasonry, which is presented here as a kind of blueprint for being a good citizen. Now, it's pretty remarkable how many of the key founders were Freemasons. But let's be super clear. The point here isn't that the Masons secretly created the United States. It's more that the country and the craft were drawing water from the same well, a shared belief in things like reason, a higher moral law, and the importance of self-improvement. And here's a really cool way this philosophy was put into practice. The actual tools of a stonemason were used as metaphors for civic virtues. The square, for instance, symbolized moral conduct, acting on the square. The compasses were about self-restraint, knowing your boundaries. The level was about equality, and the plumb was about being upright in your actions. These were seen as the tools you'd need to build not just a building, but a good society. And this wasn't just some fringe theory. Here's George Washington himself saying it plain as day. The idea that a republic absolutely depended on the morality of its citizens was a core belief. Virtue wasn't just a nice-to-have. It was seen as the main pillar holding up the entire structure of freedom.
But, having virtuous citizens was only half of the puzzle. What about the government itself? How do you design a system that accepts that people have flaws, but still manages to protect liberty? Well, that's the other half of the blueprint.
This one phrase just says it all. This was the genius, the core insight behind the Constitution. It doesn't naively assume that people in power will be angels. Nope. Instead, it weaponizes their ambition. It sets up a system of checks and balances, where the ambition of one branch is used to fight the ambition of another. It's a built-in safety valve.
And when you look at that structure, you can really see what they valued. It's all about balance over excess. The whole system was designed to slow things down, to favor thoughtful order over chaotic impulse. The point was to have a government that was steady and accountable, not one that would get tossed around by every passing political storm.
This comparison really gets to the heart of their thinking. You see, the system wasn't built because they were afraid of strong citizens. In fact, it was designed to depend on them. What they truly feared was a weak, undisciplined population. They loved liberty, but they hated license. That's just unrestrained action with no sense of responsibility. They welcomed disagreement, but they feared total disorder. Now, this whole philosophy wasn't just about government. It went straight into the world of economics, too. The how of building a nation also had to include a blueprint for prosperity. And this viewpoint argues it was all deeply tied to those same principles of human dignity and freedom. This viewpoint breaks it down into three economic pillars. First, free labor. The idea that you're judged by your own hard work. Second, private property, so you can actually secure the rewards of that work. And third, voluntary exchange, the freedom to trade with others as you see fit. The whole idea was that this kind of system, by rewarding merit and innovation, was the one that truly honored the dignity of each person. And here's the stark warning that comes with it. These two kinds of freedom, economic and political, are seen as completely inseparable. You can't have one without the other for long.
If you lose your economic freedom, it's almost guaranteed your political freedom is next on the chopping block. The ability to work for yourself was seen as a firewall against an overreaching government.
So this brings us to the final section, and this is where everything we've talked about gets turned back on us. This entire philosophical project isn't presented as some finished monument in a museum. It's an ongoing test, and the what is the challenge it poses to all of us, right now. So we're left with this really pointed question. It takes the camera off the past and aims it squarely at the present. It's basically asking, is the foundation still solid? Are those civic virtues, self-restraint, responsibility, moral conduct, still strong enough to hold up this whole big, complicated structure we've built?
Because look, the argument here is pretty sobering. The biggest threat to a republic isn't some foreign army. It's decay from the inside. It's when a country starts to get amnesia, when it forgets the core principles, the entire reason it was founded in the first place.
So how do you fight that forgetting? Well, according to this perspective, you have to actively practice these virtues. See, liberty isn't a passive thing you just get to enjoy. It makes demands on you. Courage, self-restraint, a sense of brotherhood and responsibility. These aren't just nice suggestions. They're presented as the actual price of admission for a free society.
And that leads us to the final, challenging thought this source leaves us with. It's the idea that liberty isn't some family heirloom that's automatically handed down. It's something that every single generation has to understand for itself, work for, and earn all over again.